Hey, welcome back to Daily Hope. We're really exploring a little bit of the history of Christianity in the United States. We're looking specifically at 4 times that Christian revival changed the culture, the morality, and as a result, the politics of the entire nation. That first Great Awakening happened in the 1730s to 50s before 1776 when the U.S. was born. Now, the focus of Daily Hope is always Scripture, so let me give you our Bible verse for today. It's from Psalm 33, verse 12, and it says this: "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he has chosen for his own inheritance." So there is a promise. If a nation will make God their Lord, their ruler, he will bless that nation. Now, we might not feel like it because we've been born into America, and so we see all of its problems. But it is just a statement of fact that in the course of world history, there's not been another nation that has the amount of prosperity, the amount of freedom, the amount of longevity of life. We live about twice as long as most people in history. The amount of education. We have been blessed way beyond what we realize because to us it's normal. And I believe a lot of the blessing that we've been born into, we've inherited from Christian leaders and Christians who chose to do their part in these previous Great Awakenings. Now, I mentioned yesterday that George Whitefield, that preacher, one of the preachers who led the Great Awakening in the colonies, he was well known, and his writings and thoughts were well known to the actual people who wrote the U.S. Constitution. One of those people is John Adams. Now, I want to just give you a quote from John Adams, and before I do, I've got to tell you who he is. I can't assume that you know. He served as the first vice president of the United States, then he became the president of the United States, but before that, he drafted the U.S. Constitution. I mean, think about that. He drafted the Constitution, that document that has shaped the nation. John Adams was a devout Christian, very much a product of the First Great Awakening. And I have to say this because right now a lot of history is being deconstructed and criticized. And there were some founders of America who owned slaves. And so often we're told, we shouldn't take any founders of America seriously. Well, you need to know that John Adams, as a devout Christian, never owned slaves. And his entire life, even though a lot of Americans had slaves, remember, there was a battle for the soul of America. You had pastors and religious people who fled to the New World for religious liberty. You also had slave traders, and you had outlaws who fled to the New World to be able to get away with doing whatever they wanted. This battle between good and evil has been with us from the beginning. Now, John Adams, from the beginning, his whole life said slavery is evil. It flies in the face of God's nature. I'm against it. But I want to share with you this quote. He says, quote, "Our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." What's he saying? He's saying if the nation is not Christian in its thinking and its morality, then it'll fall apart. Even as good as as hard as we've tried on this Constitution, this is a Constitution that will work for people who will vote toward justice and truth and what is good and right. You need to know when you read history, in the 1700s to the mid-1900s, when people would say religion in America, they meant Christianity. Other world religions weren't really in America yet as far as the United States population goes. So when he says our Constitution was only made for a moral and religious people, he's saying a Christian people. And you can see that in the rest of his writings. So I don't want to get too much into history. Our verse again, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." I believe we're blessed today because of these roots. We'll continue tomorrow looking at both Scripture and the history of these Great Awakenings in the United States. But let's keep praying for a 5th Great Awakening. That's why we're doing this. We're not just gathering information. We're praying for a 5th Great Awakening. See you tomorrow.